Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. October 25th, 2004. It's week 7 of the NFL season, and we have a bit of history being made in Cincinnati for this one. This is a battle on ABC in front of a national television audience on Monday Night Football between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Denver Broncos. No, this season has not gone according to plan for the Bengals, who find themselves at 1-4 with former first overall pick Carson Palmer, and facing a Denver Broncos team that's one of the best in football, sitting pretty at 5-1. However, on this day, none of that matters. Absolutely none of that matters. Because this is an absolutely historic night for Cincinnati. Because for the first time since 1989, they're playing host to a Monday Night Football game. After waiting a decade and a half, finally, they are back at home in the national spotlight. The last time they hosted a game on Monday night, which was September 25th, 1989 against the Cleveland Browns, the Berlin Wall was still up, Milli Vanilli had the #1 song in the country, and you had no idea what National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation was, because it did not exist. And now, here they finally were, with the whole country watching on ABC. And boy, did the Bengals not disappoint in this game, because when the final whistle sounded, the Bengals stunned the football world and came out on top by a final score of 23-10 in one of the biggest upsets in Monday Night Football history, and one of the greatest regular season wins in franchise history. Thanks to a great game on the ground by Rudy Johnson, who had 119 yards rushing on about 5 yards per carry, an amazing performance by Chad Johnson, who had 7 catches for 149 yards, catching more than half of the completions thrown by Carson Palmer on the day, and a great defensive performance, with the team forcing 3 turnovers and recording 3 sacks, the Bengals were in control from the onset, never trailing at any point during the contest. The game was a sign of things to come for the Bengals for the remainder of the 2004 season, and for the most part, much of the 2000s. And this was the game that let the NFL world know that after more than a decade of irrelevance, and being near the bottom of the league and being known as the Bungles, that the Cincinnati Bengals are truly back. However, it was not all fun and games for the Bengals on this day, because this game was highly controversial, not for how the Bengals played, but rather who the Bengals played. And I don't mean their opponent in the Broncos. I mean who the Bengals used on their team during this game. Because let's just say that it caused outrage throughout the league that they were allowed to do this, and to some extent, falsify very important information. Because this is the story behind one of the craziest controversies in Monday Night Football history, and definitely one of the craziest controversies for that program during the 2004 season. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand who the player was that was involved in our story in the first place. And that player was none other than this man right here, wide receiver Peter Warrick. All the way back in 2000, looking to bolster up an anemic offense, and looking to give then quarterback and projected franchise man Akili Smith, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, a much-needed security blanket, the Bengals chose Warrick with the 4th overall pick, choosing the absolutely dynamic wideout out of Florida State that seemingly could not be stopped in college. As for how that worked out throughout his first 4 years in the league, there's a certain group of players that I don't think you can call them busts, because they clearly had what it took to play in the league, and they were pretty good at their peak. However, they didn't live up to their draft status at all, and were disappointments in that regard. Blake Bortles is a perfect example of that. I wouldn't call the 3rd overall pick in the 2014 NFL Draft a bust, but did he play like a top 3 pick? God, no. Lawrence Maroney might be another good example of that. Was the Patriot running back a bad player? No, but was he worthy of a first-round, borderline top 20 pick? Definitely not. And Peter Warrick absolutely fits that bill. On one hand, if he was on the field, you absolutely had to account for him, because his change of pace and his ability in the open field was second to none, both from a catching the ball perspective and a returning the ball perspective. There's a reason that the Bengals tried to force-feed him the ball as much as possible, almost to a fault. On the other hand, while his numbers were by no means bad, with 253 receptions for 2,684 yards and 18 touchdowns through his first 4 seasons, they don't exactly scream 4th overall pick in the draft good. When you draft a guy that high, you expect him to have at least one season of 1,000 yards, and Warrick didn't have that. When you draft a guy that high, you expect him to have at least one season of 8 touchdowns, where he can find the end zone once every other game. And Warrick, from a receiving standpoint, didn't have that. And while things were definitely starting to turn around in 2003, thanks to actually having a quarterback in John Kitna, thanks to better health before the end of the year, and thanks to having reduced focus from defenses, since Chad Johnson was a man amongst boys out there, the numbers were still pretty average. He was never going to be a wide receiver 1. Despite being targeted 122 times, which was inside the top 20 in the league, he only had 819 receiving yards. Excluding running backs, this was by far the fewest receiving yards of any player to be targeted at least 120 times in a season that year. Either way, you knew the ball was going to be thrown his way. You knew he was going to play at least some role, whether it was effective or not, in this offense. And to be fair, to start off the 2004 season, he was looking like he was going to pick up right where he left off at the end of 2003, and was going to have a say in how this offense was functioning. Over the first 2 games of the season, a 31-24 loss in Week 1 to the New York Jets, and a 16-13 victory in Week 2 against the Miami Dolphins, Warrick had 11 catches for 127 yards. He was catching a very nice 69% of the passes thrown his way, unlike previous seasons where it was somewhere in the 50% range. And Carson Palmer seemed comfortable throwing to Warrick, as even though it was an admittedly small sample size, Warrick was on pace through 2 games to finish the year with just under 90 receptions and just over 1,000 receiving yards. Anytime a receiver can have those numbers, especially 1,000 yards, that's a really good thing. However, that's when things fell apart, as after that Dolphins game, he missed the ensuing 3 games with a shin injury. Initially, the injury didn't seem all that bad. Even though he suffered it in Week 1 against the Jets, it wasn't bad enough to keep him out of the action for Week 2. And after playing through the injury in Week 2, and recording 6 catches for 51 yards in the process, it seemed like a complete non-issue, especially since for the Week 3 game against the Baltimore Ravens, he was listed on the initial injury report as probable. But that was not the case, as this injury was like a cranberry, because we had to let it linger. After missing much of the offseason with torn cartilage in his right knee, an injury to his left shin proved to be brutal, as what was initially described as a shin bruise was very clearly becoming more than that. It was way more serious. Said head coach Marvin Lewis, "We've known that it's been more than a bruise. It frustrates Peter. Eventually, we would find out that it was a fractured left fibula." Said Peter Warrick on this, "It's just disappointing when you can't do what you want to do. It's been hard for me. I've been out since December, really. I haven't been able to practice with the guys." And sure enough, for this man right here, for what was one of the biggest regular season games in franchise history at the time, considering the fact that it was going to be the team's first home Monday Night Football game in a decade and a half, his status was in jeopardy. It wasn't looking good. And on the final injury report prior to the game, it was official. For the 4th straight game, Peter Warrick would be out. The man just couldn't catch a break. He would not be able to play in this game. This absolutely stinks. There's no 2 ways about it. But even though the Bengals would be without the man you've been watching this whole time, Peter Warrick, That's not to say that Carson Palmer wouldn't have options to throw to throughout the course of the game. He wasn't going to be left stranded. He had Chad Johnson, a Pro Bowl receiver the previous year, and a man who was quickly ascending into the top tier of receivers throughout the league. He had TJ Houshmandzadeh, a man who barely played in 2003, but was coming back strong in 2004, already posting a 100-yard game to his name. He had Kelly Washington, the team's third-round pick from a year ago, who found the end zone 4 times as a rookie. He had Peter Warrick. He had veteran tight end Reggie Kelly. He had, wait a second, time out, go back. Peter Warrick? Okay, scriptwriter, come on. He obviously didn't have Warrick for this game. Warrick's out with an injury and was listed as out on the injury report. Come on, that's a massive oversight on your part. You really gotta proofread these scripts before you send them to me. Because now I look like oh my god, Warrick actually played this game. Okay then. Yeah, Peter Warrick, despite being listed as out on the injury report, actually played in this game and got a target. He didn't catch a pass, hence why there are no highlights of Warrick from this game, but he was out there. Oh, you better believe that he was out there. He suited up. And you better believe that the NFL acted like CNC Music Factory, because this was a thing that made them go, 2 90s music references in one video, let's go. Anyways, when the injury report comes out, it comes out to ensure competitive fairness, as well as to help out the media guys. Because why waste time doing preparation and creating graphics on a player who's not going to play? It's not like this anymore, but back in 2004, the designations, assuming that you were on the injury report, were probable, questionable, doubtful, and out. Now, the NFL's not going to bat an eye if you're listed as questionable, but if something on the injury report did not pass the sniff test, as in a player being listed as probable and then being ruled out for the game, or a player being listed as doubtful and then playing, the league is going to step in and investigate the matter. But when a player is listed as out, that's it. That's the end of the matter. A man who's listed as out is, well, out, and is not going to play in the game. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So when, in front of a national television audience, the Bengals listed Peter Warrick as out, and then ended up playing him, oh, you better believe that the league was fuming about this. Now, Coach Lewis felt as though the team did nothing wrong here, saying on listing Warrick as out and then playing him, there was a long time between Friday and Monday. The only thing from us is that we are going to approach that a little more cautiously. I don't think anyone will declare a guy out unless he is on the operating room table. We did what we felt was right as an organization. Jack Brennan, a spokesman for the team, said on the matter, our people felt they were operating in good faith all along. There was no deceptive agenda. And while that's definitely a good lesson and caution to learn from this, it didn't change the fact that you actually did it, and you listed a player as out that ended up playing in the game. And the league, understandably, was not thrilled about this, with NFL spokesman Steve Alex saying, this is something we'll look into. You do not mess with the injury report. Words have meaning. And if you might not have been trying to get a competitive advantage in this case, if we don't act now, what's stopping a team from doing this with a star player? Having the other team game plan for that player to not play, and then that team playing said player, and the entire game plan goes out the window. It wouldn't be fair to anyone involved. It wouldn't be fair to the opposing coaches. It wouldn't be fair to the press. It wouldn't be fair to the casinos who are trying to create lines and therefore interest in the league, and it's just not a road that the league wants to go down. Which is why it's no surprise that the NFL fined the Bengals $10,000 for this injury report violation. This was a serious matter. On one hand, that's not a lot of money for an NFL team. On the other hand, this is $10,000 less if the Bengals now had. And this is $10,000 less that Mike Brown had, as in the most notoriously cheap owner in football at the time. So $10,000 to a regular owner was like a bajillion dollars to him. It's quite the irony when you think about it, that the final game of Peter Warrick's career with the Cincinnati Bengals was the one that he was never supposed to play in, and it actually set the Bengals back 5 figures in the process. Because yeah, this was the final game that Peter Warrick ever played with the Cincinnati Bengals. He was inactive for the rest of the season, and he would finish his career in 2005 in the Pacific Northwest as a member of the Seattle Seahawks. Quite the disappointing way to end an otherwise underwhelming career. This man right here, Peter Warrick, was caught up in the middle of a massive controversy that wasn't his fault by any means, but that summed up his Bengals tenure for sure. Just about everything that could have been disappointing for him was. Even in a game that was supposed to be a celebratory moment for Cincinnati, they had this black cloud over them due to the Peter Warrick injury report controversy. So let this be a lesson to all teams. Don't lie about your injury report. Don't list a player as out unless you know with 100% certainty that he is out. Because as we found out in 2004, when it came to how the Bengals handled their matters, it's safe to say that the NFL went to war with Peter Warrick. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.